Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Beaudry.
And I'm Ryan Cummings.
Welcome to Your Bread and Butter podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about career choices. It's going to be your passions, personality, and payday.
The goal for today is to discuss careers in corporate America, how to both get started and succeed. So stay tuned.
See you soon.
Discussions in this show should not be construed as specific recommendations or investment advice. Always consult with your investment professional before making important investment decisions. Securities offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a registered broker-dealer. Member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors Incorporated, a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Private Financial Design LLC are not affiliated.
Bread and butter.
Hello, everybody. I'm Andrew Beaudry.
And I'm Ryan Cummings.
Welcome to Your Bread and Butter podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about career choices.
This is a continuation from our last episode where we discussed the pros and cons of a career path in corporate America or the entrepreneurial route. So today we're going to focus on that corporate career path, some of the tips and tricks involved for those of you who are just getting started, or those of you who have maybe spent years in a corporate career, and how do you get ahead? How do you begin to succeed down that corporate career path?
And whether you're just entering the workforce or you're already knee-deep in corporate culture, this episode is going to guide you through practical, real-world strategies to not just survive, but to thrive in corporate America. The ambition that we have for you today is to really be able to look and understand what success really means.
It's different to every person. Success in your life is different. Success in your career is going to be different. You have to ask yourself, if you are in a corporate setting, what do you want out of that career? Not everyone wants to climb the corporate ladder. Not everyone is always looking for promotions. Some are not. Some want maybe just to have some influence within their work structure. Or maybe you're the type of person who actually prefers more of a work-life balance and you want to go in and collect a paycheck and go home and spend some time with your family.
For some people, it really is just all about the money. For some people, it's just all about the money. And the only issue that develops when it's just about the money is that oftentimes that leads to pretty quick dissatisfaction.
It can.
And I watched this happen, started around 2016, 2017, when I began interviewing some college graduates who were wanting to be in this industry, and they were looking for a guaranteed salary with no experience, fresh out of college with a finance degree. They were looking for $100,000 just to start. I'm sorry. No, but that's how it works. But some people
get inflation's high. But,
yeah, inflation's high, but that's, with no experience, no clients under your belt, nothing like that. It just, kind of blew me away. And it wasn't just one person, it was multiple of those graduates. But I also think too, success can also be about wanting to obtain to a leadership position where you're influencing people and you feel passion about guiding them or guiding the company, So that could work too.
Yeah, so regardless of what success means to you, whether it is that leadership, promotions, or it is more about just having, enough income to make life comfortable and having that balance, we're going to again emphasize today, what are the tips that you can do to make that happen within your career?
Absolutely. The more valuable you make yourself to a corporation, the better off you are. To start there, though, you have to build a strong foundation. You've got to excel in your role first. Reliability, results, responsiveness.
Yeah, all too often, especially when I got to, I spent almost 10 years in a corporate position, and when I got to a management position, managing a team of a dozen or so people, there was all too often I had some of those new hires you were just talking about, kids fresh out of college, maybe coming in, and not kids, young adults coming in right out of college, and
you're at that age now, where kids all of a sudden gets into your lingo.
It does. But coming right out of college, working for 6 months, and wondering where their promotion was. And they haven't even had a chance to, really dive into their existing role, and not only dive in, but learn from and then excel at their existing role. Because for a lot of people, that's a place to start, is if you do have ambitions of wanting to climb the ladder or get that next position or next promotion. Well, one of the best ways, at least to begin, this doesn't always work long term in of itself, but at least to begin is, be reliable, be results oriented, track your work, make sure people that matter, usually your boss, knows what you're accomplishing and what you're excelling at and what you're providing of value to the company or the client. It all depends on the industry you're in.
So in your corporate world, did you guys have a lot of like teams or groups that were working on projects together?
We did. Yeah.
So I see a lot in the training that the young people are going through today, that they get a lot of group projects together. And it's maddening for some of these students because they're doing a bulk of the work while 3 other people are not doing any of their work. So how important is it in that group dynamic for reliability?
It's huge. Learning that skill in school and, trying to make sure that you're not only participating in the group, but, also helping facilitate the group, because that's key too. Every group has a quote unquote leader, even if there isn't technically one, even if there isn't formally one or anything like that. There's importance to being able to not only do the work and do your share, but also make sure that everyone's collaborating, work is coming together, and all of that stuff, at least in my experience, translates very directly right into the corporate world.
And it builds on towards the results oriented measure that you take. You track and measure your work, understand what you need to do.
Being responsive too, making sure that you're following proper etiquette and communications and being able to email properly, have clear subject lines, action steps. These sound basic, right? It sounds obvious.
It does.
But all too often, you'll get people that don't communicate properly in those methods. And the one biggest thing that I always had to stress so much and learn myself and eventually try to pass on to people that were on my team is it's very difficult to interpret tone via email.
Right.
And you may read something one way and the person who sent it may have implied it in a completely different manner, and you're just reading it in a different tone than what they intended. So point being concise, especially in written communication, is a very important skill to build on.
I think that leads to one of the more significant parts of it, and that's just mastering communication, making sure that you have, it's a clear subject line, it's a action steps and the tone message you're talking about. You've got to learn how to master that communication. A lot of people think, well, I'll just send off an email. Well, but you don't know what that email is actually going to do. You should have a purpose to that email. I mean, there's even classes in how to respond properly in an email. I also think it's important to learn corporate's unwritten rules. I'll bet you, Goldman, you had a few of those.
Oh, sure. I mean, there's, we had a relatively relaxed dress code. Goldman was in years past always business formal, suit, tie, etc. In my time there, they got more to business casual. So, you could wear khakis, a button-up shirt, something like that. And we even actually got to the point where on Fridays we could even wear jeans in the office. So they had progressed in times, but the point of me mentioning that is there were still some unwritten rules of, even on Fridays, like you couldn't come in with jeans with holes all over them or anything like that. You don't want to come in with jeans that were, covered in paint or dirt and whatnot. I mean, even though it wasn't necessarily explicitly in the rule, it was an implied dress code.
I'm not even sure why these ripped jeans are even in a fad now. I don't, I'm sorry, I don't get it. Like, I get a pair of jeans and if they ripped, I'd be like, oh no, but now you wear the ripped jeans. You're like, that's cool. But
I do have to say, back in college, I am guilty of wearing some of them. So I get it, but
it's generational.
It's a generational thing, but yes. But yeah, and then even in meetings too, that was another big one is learning when to chime in, when to lead, when to listen, and especially in a corporate setting, when and how to disagree, because you want to make your voice heard, you want to be able to contribute, but you need to do it in a way that doesn't insult the person you're disagreeing with, one, and then two. And it was one thing that, again, I think I learned early, is have a solution when you disagree. Don't just shoot ideas down and be that negative person that derails the meeting and derails the ideas. But if you're going to disagree with an idea, have some alternatives that you're willing to propose.
Right. I think Ryan's onto a strong point here. For those of you out there that aren't aware, a good leader wants dissonance. They want to hear the opposite side of the equation, because a good leader wants to know that they're moving in the right and best direction for whatever their objective is. And so learning how to disagree and how to present yourself, it is about having a solution. And even if you don't have a solution, you can say, I'm not really on board with that because it will do X, Y, Z, and we're not really sure how that will lead. So I think it's important to learn how to disagree either with a solution or with a specificity that gives that perfect example of why you think there's a crack in that foundation.
But yeah, I think having that level of specificity can allow the solutions to come, even if it's not from you directly, providing the exact reasons why you disagree rather than just saying, no, that's a dumb idea. It can allow maybe someone else in the group to come up with, oh, okay, I see why you're disagreeing. Let's try X, Y, Z instead, even if you maybe don't have the solution in your own mind.
And that leads us to really the second part here in step 2 of this, and that is creating your own personal brand.
It's huge. It's huge. We actually had countless meetings on this in my time in corporate America, discussing just how to conduct yourself, how to be that, have that strong personal brand, be the person who, and this goes to what we were just talking about, is the problem solver, is not just the person who complains all the time, but is the problem solver, is a leader, an innovator, is reliable. And, it can even be, with reliability, it can even be something as simple as time management and making sure you're getting tasks done on time and projects. And, the one time I even tried to organize a meeting on time management, but unfortunately no one showed up.
Because they didn't know the time?
Yes.
Well, the reality is that how we function and how we are comes across to people and communicates to people. So for several weeks, I actually going on, many weeks now, on Monday nights, there's a particular restaurant here in town, like going there, getting sushi. And when the manager or the waitress sees me come in, they're really ready for me. They're happy to see me. They come here, we got a table for you, or it's busy. And I know that's not a corporate business setting, but it's the idea that your brand and who you are as a person comes across, and people will get that. You're reliable. You show up on time. You pitch in with ideas. You don't want to be the negative Nelly or the, what's that Saturday night, Debbie Downer, kind of thing. People, oh no, they're coming to the meeting.
Right.
Oh.
No, I'm sure even in the example you gave with the restaurant, now that they recognize you coming in and maybe are prepared for, what your preferences are and everything, I'm sure that establishes a brand for them in your eyes.
It does. I think having your own personal brand is a really important part. And there's a fellow that used to be the CEO of John Hancock, and he actually put out a book called Career Warfare. It's actually a good book. It's not the greatest book, but it's a good book. Hi, David. Anyway, David's no longer the CEO of John Hancock. He sold it for millions and millions of dollars. Anyway, his career advice in there is that, you create your own brand, and whether you stay at that company or go forward, who you are goes with you. So I think, showing consistency, professionalism, and be memorable for the right reasons.
Yes, that is key. And I think in addition to creating a personal brand, networking is big. I think that word is maybe used somewhat nebulously in the corporate world, but when you actually have real meaningful networking opportunities, it could be as simple as even internally in a company, in a big corporation. I did this all the time, working cross-departmentally, being able to work with the sales team who was, for example, in my own personal experience, we were advising our clients financially. They worked for a lot of these big Fortune 500 companies under these corporate contracts, being able to talk and meet with the sales team that would actually go out and meet these corporate contracts and sit with these Fortune 500 companies and pitch our business to make sure that they were understanding how we operate, what we do, what we don't do. So that way they're not over-promising and under-delivering was a key on both ends.
Even in our business and what we do, we deal with our broker-dealer, we deal with outside vendors, and it's nice when we meet leaders from these different companies, as well as our own broker-dealer, and our staff or ourselves have been engaged with working with somebody, and we mention them and we praise them because of the good work they do, and that eventually comes back to us in many ways. And we're thought of in those circles as sort of a bellwether, as a canary in the coal mine, if you will, of situations that develop. And it's nice to be known as a group here, our business, in that fashion. So I think, being memorable is one thing, but also strategically being within the network where you have contacts and people know that Ryan, Andrew, we're reliable. We can get this job done. And then even the external networking is important when you bring outside vendors in. But there's a real key to this network strategically, and that's a big point for you to bring up.
Yeah, it's it can be tricky to find the right people to network with, but if you do find some of those individuals that you really click with, admire, maybe appreciate their insight, they could even double as a mentor. And I think and we talked about it a little bit in the last episode. Having a strong mentor can be almost invaluable in any career, entrepreneur, corporate career, but in this case, we're talking in the corporate space. Having someone that you can rely on that, maybe has been there, done that can help you move up the corporate ladder. And we were discussing this when creating this episode, trying to not just find the person who's maybe just in the position that you want, because, some people tend to gravitate towards that. You want to be the CEO or the CFO one day. Well, yeah, it's tempting to maybe have them as your mentor, but if they're not a good person to begin with, do you really want to leverage, even though they're in the position you might want, do you really want to leverage that person as a mentor in the first place?
So I have a quick story to tell on this. And when I first starting out in business, I went into the John Hancock building, and I was meeting with some of the executives there, and I was approaching them about a plan I had to expand our investment portfolio, and I come up with some ideas. And there was a custodian that worked there. And I was going up regularly enough in filming the TV show we were doing that I, got to know him a little bit. Now, my dad was a custodian too. So, I've learned that, these people can be great resources for all kinds of stuff. This guy, every time he'd see me, he'd sit down, he was going to take a coffee break. He'd say, "Hey, you want to have a cup of coffee?" I learned more about him as a custodian for the John Hancock, and found out which executives I should talk to, which executives I should not talk to, based on his cleaning of their offices and his interactions with them. Like, he would say, well, that person is a real, but this person, you might want to glide with them. It was very helpful. And it ended up getting me into contact with the people at Fidelity that I needed to get in touch with to make the changes. So I think mentors can be not always the people that you think they are, as you just alluded to, as far as like their personality, who they are, but look for all mentors, all possibilities.
Now, the other component, navigating office politics.
Yeah.
I think the key distinction we want to make here right at the top of this topic is office politics doesn't immediately equal something bad.
Right.
Office politics and its, basic definition can just simply be understanding which people have influence, the perception of different people, the perception of yourself in other people's eyes, and where the decision-making dynamics lie within your office. I'll give a quick example of in my time as managing a team and having some advisors. There were points where some of our advisors were a little bit feeling overworked. Having a very large client load. Some of our advisors were handling upwards of a few hundred clients themselves, and just having 7-8+ meetings a day and just feeling overwhelmed and overworked. So a solution to that is, let's try to bring on more advisors. Well, I could talk with my supervisor about that and make the case for it, but they were not the ones making the calls and calling the shots for actually bringing on new hires. They may have done some interviews, but they weren't creating the budget for salaries for the upcoming year.
Yeah.
So, being able to talk to them was great, but, actually getting to go and talk with some individuals in the HR department, people who actually had a different perspective on, who we're bringing in and how many people we're bringing in, and being able to kind of climb up that ladder and find those decision makers it did end up making a big difference. And at the same time too, getting a group of others in my similar position to also advocate for this, have a larger voice, was more impactful.
Yeah. So just so everybody knows out there, the word politics is it just comes out of the Latin, and it's just actually about the body of people that come together and interact in community. Politics isn't about elections and all that stuff. Politics is, the only way you can avoid it is to be the bear who lives in the woods in his own cave. I mean, that's it. And if you're going to do that, just learn to eat berries and get poison ivy and all that stuff. So, but truthfully, you have to find a way to build alliances without tearing down other relationships. And I always want to vent upward, not sideways. If you really have some things you need to talk about, go upward to your managers, and keep your reactions always measured, especially in the group settings, as we talked about earlier.
Right. This ties right back into the brand conversation.
Yeah.
If you're that person that, is always gossiping with your colleagues and complaining about this, complaining about that, but never providing solutions or never providing, a path to fixing these things, then you're going to be known as the person who complains and gossips. And,
Debbie Downer.
Exactly. So, like you said, I think vent upwards, I got to repeat it. That's a big one, is if you want to make change, talk to the people that can influence.
And you made this point just a little bit ago. Learn the power structure, how decisions are really made. And that way, the worst thing that can happen in a situation if you move up to take your case to somebody else is they just say no. That's fine. But at least you were respectful, and whether they were respectful back makes no difference, but you made your brand known. You made known that you're really here. Because really, the next step is the biggest one: pursuing growth and being in the pattern of developing.
Yep. I think the old adage is true. You never stop learning. You never want to. And as soon as you stop learning, you're going backwards. And so being able to, learn in many different ways, it's not always about just courses or classes or anything like that. It could be just simply getting feedback, whether it's from a supervisor or even whether it's from a direct report, someone who works under you. What additional things can you do to try to, impact their job and help them more efficiently or make their job a little bit easier? That was something I always tried to instill with any of my direct reports. Was in our one-on-one meetings, it would always be a discussion of, well, is there anything more I can do for you? Now, I know that question, kind of gets a little bit of, hate, whether it's online or and whatnot in articles, because it's a little bit nebulous. And so I would try to come in with some examples of, hey, I noticed like X, Y, and Z seems to be, maybe getting a lot of this done, or maybe you're a little bit behind in that. Is there something specifically I can help you in this area or that area? So trying to actually provide that feedback to people I'm working with, and then ask for it regularly from them.
And even if some feedback can be a little bit critical, but there's always something you can learn there. So it's better to not defend and really digest it, thank the person. And then if there's reason to go back and, clarify because they've made an accusation or something like that, well, that's different. But the truth is, invest yourself in training, certifications, continuing education, especially if the company offers to pay for it.
Yeah. I mean, that's all the traditional stuff, but there's value there. And so, like you said, if the company pays for it, you can get things done. Like, for example, for myself, Goldman Sachs paid for my MBA. And even at the time, I was still in a more of a management position, didn't necessarily need the CFP to continue what I was doing, but thought maybe I might want to, I'd already kind of thought that maybe I might not want to continue down the management route.
Did they pay for your CFP too?
They did.
Wow,
they did.
that's
so
awesome.
I pursued that either way. And, even if I didn't necessarily need it in a management position, I kind of saw myself maybe not continuing that route, and took advantage of the company paid certification.
Absolutely. And the next thing here really, and it just sums it up, is don't be afraid to raise your hand and to stretch for opportunities to prove yourself. Be strategic. Don't take on something that is just completely going to be irresponsible for your work-life balance, but don't just take on more work. Be strategic about it, but stretch yourself. Put yourself in a position where you're a go-to person.
I agree. And then the last step that we'll discuss here today is, managing your career like a business. Even though you are an employee in corporate America, a lot of those aspects we discussed in the last episode translate to managing a career. Keep a record of your progress, of your wins. Make sure that metrics, or emails, positive feedback, those things are all recorded. So that way, you can brag when the time comes and be able to show the contributions you've made to either your coworkers or even your clients, if they've given feedback or anything like that.
Yeah, not that we would want your self-worth tied up into a whole bunch of this, but the truth is about keeping track of these things is that it's easy to forget those small little wins where you've had an influence and you've directed the group to something, and it's good for you to note it yourself. And it's good in those times when you feel like, am I really being recognized? Am I really doing what I need to do? And having that reality check in front of you, not for you to brag to other people about it, but to give yourself your own confidence. Now, there's a difference between having confidence and making your self-worth. No business or no career should define your self-worth. Your self-worth has to come from other things, or should, I say, come from other things, especially if you've been true to yourself. But it makes your interviews and your reviews on your performance a whole lot easier if you know your faults and you also know your victories.
Absolutely. I mean, if you have you're having a performance review, and that could eventually really lead to things like salary raises or increased benefits, anything, or even promotions potentially. Knowing your metrics, if your department has certain KPIs, key performance indicators that you aren't tracking, well, having those tracked and logged is going to make it that much easier to discuss maybe how you excelled in certain indicators, and can like I said, help you get that larger raise or that promotion that you've been seeking.
Yeah, I mean, you normally get feedback in these kind of reviews, and again, if there are certain people that are holding you back, and you know how that is, well, this is where setting quarterly, annual goals for yourself, even if your company doesn't, is good for you, because then you can set out and establish that pattern. Now, you have an acronym for this, don't you?
Yes. So anyone who does work in corporate America has probably heard of this. It's nothing new.
Is this Sigma 6 again? Is this
something like that? They might use it as well, but they're called SMART goals. So, and I think there is value to them with a lot of these things, even though that some of them are, these maybe overplayed tropes.
That's okay.
There's value to them in and of themselves, and making your goals specific enough to track it. That way you can measure it, measurable being the M in that SMART goal. Achievable, so you don't want to have this, if your goal is to become a CFO in a year or something like that, and you just started a few months ago, that might not fit that achievable realm. And make sure that they're relevant to your life and your definition of success, like we started today's episode with. Yeah. And then probably most importantly, time bound. You're putting a parameter around when you want to achieve that goal. So that way it's not something you just keep kicking down the road and, putting it to the next year or the year after that.
Yeah. Now, these are not things that Ryan and I are just kind of making up. It comes from a wealth of experience. Comes my end and his end, having worked in corporate America. But I will tell you that when we're kind of coming to this conclusion here, we want to make sure there's certain things that you avoid. And there's common pitfalls here to be careful of. And that is, number one, waiting to be noticed. Just talk about that.
That was kind of I was waiting to tie this in with the first step that we mentioned in this 6th step of success, which was excelling at your current role. While that is an important first step, if that's the only step you're taking and just doing your role, even if you're excelling at it, doing it well, and that's it. You get in, you get out, you do your job. Even if you are succeeding at it, it may not be enough to get you where you want to go. So simply sitting there, waiting to be noticed. Instead, one thing that again, I learned in my career, and I try to pass it on to anyone that I talk with, is, talking with your supervisors, your, people that you report to or even above them, letting them know your goals and asking them, if I want to achieve this promotion or this position by X amount of time, what things do I need to do to get there? We even had a client that works for one of our companies we advise with, even just recently, earlier this year, I was having a conversation with him, and he was asking me just that he kind of felt stuck in his job. And, I had asked him, well, have you talked with your supervisor around, well, if you want to get to this next position, what advice does he have to get you there?
Yeah.
And he was like, well, no, I haven't.
Yeah.
I was like, well, that could be part of the reason why.
It's basic 101,
that
man.
you haven't just been picked. If you're not getting picked, make them pick you.
Yeah.
Find that path to get you there.
Force that out there. I mean, if you're waiting to be noticed, the problem is that you just slowly feel underappreciated, negative, all of that. And then the other one is all of a sudden, you're burning bridges, which is a terrible thing to do. You don't want to burn bridges. You never know how that person might be involved in your future. We live in a universe that has threads and blankets all running through it, and I have too many stories to talk about that. But you also want to prioritize perfection over progress. You want to make sure that you want to get progress going, but you can't have to.
Not at the sacrifice of perfection.
Yeah.
Because nothing's ever going to be 100% perfect.
Right.
And so that was, we were talking about this the other day too. Even in myself, as I kind of progressed in my own career, I still find struggles with it even today, of like wanting to do things myself because I know I'm able to do them correctly, but needing to be able to delegate and let other people take on some of those things so we can get more progress done and complete things.
If perfection is your goal in life, there's several things you should never do. Number one, play golf.
Agreed.
Golf is one of those things where it's just about teaches you about life because you're always overcoming what you just did to yourself. The second thing is to choose to have a career where everybody else has control over you. That's not a really healthy career. I mean, if you have to take a job, you take a job. But you got to be careful, though. You got to prioritize that progress is better than perfection, and don't go the other way where perfection is really more dominant. And then the soft skills, the communication skills, the pleasant things, the gratefulness, the attitude that goes into it. The attitude is a really big part of all of this.
It is. So as we begin to wrap up here today, I think some of the key takeaways are, begin to start small, progress in your career, focus on what you're good at, and try to really hone in on some of those soft skills, and be able to navigate office politics and be able to communicate in an effective manner. And you build on these skills one at a time. That's another key thing that I've always tried to advise, especially to anyone earlier in their career, is as you're developing that public speaking skill, and I think it holds true to this topic in general, don't try to be good at everything all at once. Focus on one or two things, improve on those one or two things. And once you've reached a certain level of mastery in those skills, move on to the next skills and begin to progress on those, and you kind of build over time. I think that applies to this too. Is all these, we've mentioned a lot of skills and a lot of tips here today. Don't feel like you got to be a master of all of these like that overnight.
Right.
It's a building process.
Exactly.
As time goes on.
So Ryan has not yet given us his dad joke for the day. So
I do have one.
You do have one?
I do have one.
Oh,
yes.
Well, come on.
Well, one other important piece of corporate America is staying organized.
Yes, it is. That's
I always believed of having a very clean and organized calendar. Keeps you on time, keeps you accountable to things, and it's something that helps breed some success.
Yeah, I agree.
But all the dates and all the meetings, all filling it up.
Yeah.
Eventually, it kind of created a date problem within my calendar, just being too full. Okay. Too many dates, too many meetings.
What does Kelly think about that?
Too much data.
Too much data. Well, listen, the truth is there's a lot more to this. And you worked and you were successful in the corporate world. But I do want you to tell folks as we conclude here, why is it you left the corporate world? You had success.
I think it was an ability to be more flexible, do some of the things that we talked about here today, and being able to progress in your own career, and, kind of seeing that, and we'll talk about it actually a lot more in the next episode. So not to tease too much into that, but, be able to kind of control more of where you're going, what you're doing, and, be able to, there are certain things in this career as a financial advisor and being able to help your clients that, maybe I didn't always 100% agree with the corporate model and the way that we were doing things. So, there was some flexibility in the corporate world to be able to do things the way you wanted to, but there's also the downside of working in a corporate environment is you do also have to do things in the way the corporation wants. And it may not necessarily align with, what I thought was in the best interest of my clients. So it allowed for that extra flexibility.
And that's more of a tease for those who might be interested and say, well, I really want to be in business for myself.
Yeah.
But for those people that are going to be listening to this in a career mode, what's your last piece of advice for them?
Keep learning. I think that's the biggest thing, was one of those steps. Keep learning, keep growing, keep progressing, because if you're not growing and you're not learning, you're moving backwards.
And you have more control over your career than you think.
You do.
The people over and above you making these decisions, you still have your own personal branding that you can control. So thank you for listening today. I'm really grateful that you stepped in and watched this with us. So I want you to remember, live today for the tomorrow that's in your heart.
Because you'll never have more time to plan for tomorrow than you do today.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.